Most people will never force themselves to act alone, not because they can't, but because nobody ever taught them that acting alone, with no validation, with no one watching, is the most powerful thing a human being can do for their own life. The day I stopped waiting for someone to push me was the day my entire life changed direction completely. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how that works, step by step, in a way that you can apply to your real life starting today. The moment you decide to act is the moment everything begins to shift. Not when you feel ready, not when the timing is perfect, not when the fear disappears. I've seen people wait their entire lives for a feeling that never came, and they called it bad luck. The truth is, motivation is a result of action, not the cause of it. You move first, and the feeling follows. Every single morning, there's a war happening inside you before your feet even touch the floor. One side says, "Not today," and the other side knows exactly what needs to be done. The person who wins that war consistently is the person who builds a life worth living. I'm not talking about pushing through exhaustion every day like a machine with no limits. I'm talking about making a firm decision that your goals matter more than your excuses. The strongest people I've ever known weren't the ones who never felt resistance. They were the ones who acted anyway, even when everything inside them said to wait. That decision, to move despite the discomfort, is what separates the life you have from the life you want. Resistance is normal. It shows up every time you're about to do something that matters. And just below that resistance, something far more powerful is quietly waiting to be built. Discipline is not a punishment you give yourself for being weak. Discipline is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. Without it, your intentions stay intentions forever. They never become results. I've met brilliant people, talented people, people with incredible ideas, who achieved nothing, not because they lacked ability, but because they lack the daily practice of following through. Here's what most people miss. Discipline doesn't demand perfection, it demands consistency. You don't have to read 100 books this year, but you do need to read 10 pages today. Try starting with something like The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson or Atomic Habits by James Clear. Both of those books will show you exactly how small daily disciplines compound into massive results. The person who reads 10 pages a day for a year has a completely different mind than the one who doesn't. Every time you skip a commitment you made to yourself, there's a cost. It doesn't show up on a bill, it doesn't come with a notification, but it's being collected silently. The cost is your confidence, your momentum, and over time, your belief in yourself. When discipline enters your life, chaos doesn't just shrink, it starts to disappear. And once you feel what that kind of personal control is like, you'll never want to go back to the chaos. Knowledge without action is one of the saddest things I've ever witnessed. I've known people who read every self-help book ever written and still couldn't get out of their own way. Understanding a concept is not the same as living it, and life only rewards the ones who move. The body in motion is the body that creates results, and everything else is just preparation. Transformation doesn't start in your mind, it starts the moment your behavior changes. Let me give you something practical right now, because this is where most people stay stuck. If your goal is to build a business, don't spend 6 months planning. Spend 30 minutes today registering the idea. If you want to get in shape, don't wait for January. Get on the floor right now and do 20 push-ups. If you want to save money, open a second account today and transfer $10 into it this week. The size of the action doesn't matter nearly as much as the habit of acting. Every step you take in the right direction gives you something you can't get from thinking: clarity. When you're moving, you start to see what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change. Confidence doesn't come from believing in yourself before you start, it comes from watching yourself follow through. The person you're becoming is built entirely out of the actions you take when no one is watching. And somewhere between the first step and the 100th, something in you quietly starts to shift. Procrastination doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up loud and obvious. It comes dressed as, "I'll start Monday," or "I just need to feel more prepared first." It's the most comfortable trap ever built, because it never feels like a trap while you're in it. Day by day, nothing dramatic happens, no alarm goes off, no warning is given. But week after week, year after year, the life you were supposed to be living drifts further away. The real danger isn't the big things you keep putting off. It's the small ones. The email you didn't send, the conversation you avoided, the habit you skipped today. Each one alone seems harmless, almost laughable, but together they build a pattern. And that pattern, repeated long enough, becomes an identity. The identity of someone who doesn't follow through. That's not who you are, but it can absolutely become who you are if you're not paying attention. I want you to think about one thing you've been putting off for more than 30 days. Just one thing that, if you did it today, would move your life forward in a real, measurable way. That thing represents a version of you that's been waiting, quietly, for you to stop making excuses. The cost of delay is always higher than the cost of action. Always, without exception. And the longer you wait to pay that price, the more interest it collects in ways you can't yet see. The biggest lie people tell themselves is that they need to go all in from day one. They think transformation looks like a dramatic overhaul, a total reset, a complete reinvention overnight. But every extraordinary result I've ever seen was built on top of something embarrassingly simple. It wasn't a massive leap. It was a small, consistent step repeated without interruption. The compound effect of showing up daily is more powerful than any single burst of motivation you'll ever feel. If you want to build a reading habit, start with 2 pages a day, not 2 books a week. If you want to get healthier, start with a 15-minute walk, not a 2-hour gym session. If you want to grow financially, automate a small transfer to savings every single week. The goal in the beginning is not transformation. The goal is to prove to yourself that you show up. Because the person who shows up small every day eventually becomes the person who changes everything. Consistency is the most underrated skill in the world, and almost no one talks about it honestly. Everyone wants to talk about intensity, hustle, grinding, going hard, but the people I've watched build real, lasting success were boring in the best possible way. They did the same right things, day after day, long after the excitement wore off. And underneath all that quiet consistency, something extraordinary was slowly, powerfully being built. Comfort is not your friend, it's just your most familiar enemy. Every time you stay where it's safe, you're not resting, you're shrinking. Growth only happens at the edge of what you can currently handle, not inside what's already easy. The moment something feels hard, that's not a sign to stop, that's the signal you've been waiting for. Your potential lies exactly in that uncomfortable space where most people choose to turn back. Think about every skill you have right now that you're genuinely proud of. At some point, each one of those skills was terrifying, awkward, and painfully uncomfortable. You didn't become good at them by staying comfortable. You became good because you pushed through. The same is true for every area of your life that still feels underdeveloped: your finances, your health, your relationships. The discomfort you're avoiding right now is the exact entry point to the version of yourself you actually want to become. Once you start reading discomfort as a signal instead of a warning, everything changes. It stops being something to escape and starts being something to follow. I'm not saying you need to suffer for the sake of it. That's not growth. That's just unnecessary pain. I'm saying that when your body resists, when your mind says, "This is too hard," that's worth investigating. Because right on the other side of that feeling, something real is waiting to be unlocked. Every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. Not a big, dramatic vote that the world sees, a quiet, private vote that only you know about. When you wake up early, you vote for discipline. When you skip the workout, you vote against it. When you follow through on a promise to yourself, You're not just completing a task. You're writing the story of who you are, one decision at a time. Most people think identity is something you're born with or handed to you by your circumstances. They walk around saying, "I'm just not the kind of person who does that," as if it were permanent. But identity is built, brick by brick, through repeated behavior over time. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. Your habits don't just produce results, they shape who you believe you are. And when your beliefs about yourself change, your entire life changes with them. The most powerful thing you can do today is keep one small promise to yourself. It doesn't have to be impressive, no one else even needs to know about it. But when you do it, something inside you registers it. Your subconscious takes note. Do that enough times, and the voice that used to say, "I can't," starts to get quieter. In its place, something stronger and far more reliable begins to take root. The person who thinks 10 years ahead makes completely different decisions today than the person who only thinks about tonight. When you know exactly where you're going, the small sacrifices stop feeling like sacrifices. They start feeling like investments. And the return on those investments is a life you actually chose. Discipline becomes easier when it's attached to something that genuinely matters to you. Without that long-term vision, you're just white-knuckling through each day with no real reason to hold on. Write down where you want to be in 5 years, not in vague terms, but specifically. What does your health look like? What does your financial life look like? Who are the people around you? What does a Tuesday morning feel like in that version of your life? When you make the future real and vivid in your mind, it pulls you forward in a way that willpower alone never can. That clarity is what keeps discipline alive long after the initial motivation has completely faded. The price of discipline is real. It costs you comfort, convenience, and sometimes the approval of people around you. But the price of regret is so much higher, and it gets paid in full, with interest, over an entire lifetime. Every day you choose the short-term ease, you're borrowing against a future version of yourself. And that version has to pay back everything you avoided doing today, only the bill is much larger by then. The life you're building right now, through every small, unglamorous, consistent action, is the only one you've got. Everything I shared with you today comes down to one simple truth. The life you want is built in the moments when nobody is watching, when you're tired, when you don't feel like it, when every part of you wants to wait until tomorrow. Those are the moments that define you. Not the big wins, not the highlight reel, but the quiet, unglamorous decision to show up anyway. That decision, made consistently, is what separates the life you have from the life you're capable of living. Now pick one thing you've been putting off and drop it in the comments right now. Just one thing. Saying it out loud is already the first step. If this video added something real to your life, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications. Because what I share here is not content to pass the time. It is a roadmap for people who are serious about building a life they are proud of.